Cool. Well, we are at 12:03 right now. I'm going to go ahead and get things started for this Ed Whitelaw Summer Internship Informational Webinar. What I will do is introduce myself and the participants that we have today from ECONorthwest. I will talk a bit about ECONorthwest and what we do and why we do it. We'll look at some sample projects that ECONorthwest has been a part of, and then we'll finish up talking about, hey, what is this Ed Whitelaw internship exactly? What are the requirements to apply, length of it, and we'll reserve time at the end for question and answer. Should be two different chat places that you see. One is just a general chat where you can type things into discussion-wise, but then there should also be a Q&A section. So if you have questions that you want answered, that's the place that we've got some backstage folks that will help us organize those questions and make sure that those questions do get answered. This is a recorded webinar as well, so you'll be able to find this online. If, hey, what did Scott or Sam say about a particular question? You'll have access to that after the fact as well. So I will begin with introductions. My name is Scott Goodman. I use he, they pronouns. I've been at ECONorthwest for a bit over 3 years now. I came from the Portland State University Masters of Urban and Regional Planning program, where I specialized in affordable housing finance and real estate development. And that's what I started out doing at ECONorthwest, but we do a really broad range of different projects and type of work. So I've branched out and done a lot of general economic development. I have a background in teaching, so I've done some work around education and social policy. I have a background in Spanish as well, so I've got to participate in focus groups and translations and things in Spanish. It's a very broad type of work that I am involved in here at ECONorthwest. And I will hand over to Sam to introduce himself, and he will have a little more to say a bit later on in this webinar also.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, my name is Sam Schroeder, research analyst here at Echo. I've been full-time for about 6 months, graduated from the University of Oregon just this past spring. But before the summer before that, I was an intern at Echo. So I started in a very similar program. And most of my work here revolves around environment, natural resources, as well as recreation, demand, and tourism. And I jump around on all sorts of projects. And I'll send it over to Erin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Hill. I am in our Portland office. I have been with Echo for about 2.5 years now. I'm part of the human resources team here. And so I will be part of the recruiting efforts for this role this summer, which I'm really excited about. We've got a great record of having really successful summer internships. So I'm excited that you are all here. And I hope we'll see all of your applications soon.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Sam. So I will get us moving forward with a little bit about ECONorthwest. That's how it's pronounced, ECONorthwest, not ECONorthwest. If you call it ECONorthwest, that's not a problem as well. But originally it was founded as an economics firm. We have since branched off and do a variety of different types of work. Let's see. So here you can find this on our company webpage as well, a bit about ECONorthwest and some of the different values that we have and the equity framework that we use for a lot of our data research. We focus a lot on data. We do some other work as well, but we are principally in the weeds using different programs and analytics in order to quantify and qualify available data, create data so that we can make informed decisions. On the right-hand side, you'll see our values about who we are and why we are. And I will emphasize these, say them out loud, and have a little point to say about it as well. Our values include independence, we are insightful, we are curious, we are collaborative, and when you combine those things together, we strive for impact. If when you see those values, they resonate with you, then this is a good place for you to work. If those do not resonate with you, then you should seek employment elsewhere because here at Echo Northwest, we do a lot of very important and very difficult work that is rooted in these different values. My recommendation is if you choose to apply for this internship, that you choose to emphasize some of these values in that application, whether that's in your cover letter, in the interview questions, but I would very much plug those in because this is what we are looking for with prospective interns and then potentially future employees as well. It's what got me to work at Echo Northwest and most of the other employees as well, that if these types of values resonate with you, then you are going to enjoy the type of rigorous work we do at Echo Northwest. Echo Northwest has been around for over 50 years, which is nuts to think about for a consulting firm. It originally came out of the University of Oregon and Ed Whitelaw, who is an economics professor there, hence the name, the Ed Whitelaw Memorial Internship. And through that, we have always had a strong affiliation with Oregon universities and fostering that next generation of folks that are going to be helping with policy decisions that are driving policies both at the local, state, and regional level. Our span of influence is pretty large, and that can be daunting and overwhelming at times, knowing that some of the projects that you are working on are going to influence housing production over the next 50 years or have economic development impacts that are affecting rural areas that are struggling to make ends meet right now. All of that to say that we have very interesting, complex, difficult work that we are doing. And since its founding, there has always been either recent graduates of universities or students themselves that are involved in this work, because very much that is the next generation of folks that are going to be driving policy in the state. Speaking of policy, Echo Northwest has four primary policy areas that we focus on: people, place, environment, and economy. Now, there's obviously going to be overlap in those different policy areas, but that's generally how we have our work structured. So I primarily focus on the place and economy policy areas, but of course I have intersection with people, environment. We'll talk a bit more about what that looks like, but I'll give you a little more context on each of those policy areas. So starting out, people. This has got to do with things like education, workforce development, social policy. We've got a strong branch of work in here that is helping drive a lot of the decisions that are happening primarily in Oregon, but some of this work also extends into Washington and the region, and we've done some national work around education policy as well. This bridges things like environmental justice. It's got things to do with equitable wealth generation, social safety nets, tax policy, which when I first started out here, I never would have thought would be like, oh, what an interesting topic that I want to be involved in. But as you learn more about the complexity of these systems and our tax system in Oregon, which is whack for lots of different reasons and affects how things get funded and the different boundaries that we have to work within and the levers that we have available to us in order to help out in education or wealth generation. We dive into the weeds of these things that make it very interesting, and we have a big role to play in the policies that are affecting people. Next, we've got economy. So this ranges from economic development to business feasibility, infrastructure, finance. Again, looking at some of the tax policies associated with this. What are the different things that rural communities all the way up to the most urban of places like Portland and Eugene, what are the policies they can do to encourage additional economic development? We do this not just in Oregon, this is Washington, this is California. We have recently made an effort to expand more into the Colorado region and have opened up a new office over there with some additional employees in that area. We have lots of work to do around the economy. Next is environment. This is an area that sort of put Echo Northwest on the map originally. We've been involved in some very important litigation cases over the years, some of which include Echo Northwest was involved in the Exxon Valdez oil spill and defending the state of Alaska for that. We've also done some work around the northern spotted owl, which is something that greatly affected Oregon and the timber industry and how we treat sustainable timber and the lumber that's associated with it. We do all sorts of work around wildfire resilience. We do a lot of work around dams and what's happening with dams and dam removal and dam placement. Water quality. I was having a conversation just this morning about how sewage systems, you wouldn't think it at first, but sort of a sexy topic once you get into it about the influence that it has on all of our lives and in urban areas in particular, and what a miracle it is that it works. I hadn't thought about that very much until coming to Echo Northwest and realizing like, oh, sewage system is very much connected with how housing gets developed, how our lakes and rivers are treated. All of these topics are very much interconnected, and Echo Northwest is often at the very center of those conversations. Lastly, policy area here we have is place. A couple of the key things that I will point out here, affordable housing, housing development, equitable communities, infrastructure, and public services. This is where I spend the majority of my time working, why I came to Echo Northwest originally. Like I said, I do a lot of work around the valuation of land and zoning and how a city can choose. You might zone to have 20-story buildings, but just because you zone for that, does that mean that the market would be able to build that? Probably not. And so we look at the intersection of zoning policy, market feasibility, affordable housing finance, growth management. Oregon is famous for its urban growth boundaries that have controlled how the state, its cities can expand and how they can't expand. A lot to do with our agricultural land, the value we've placed on that, and forest land, and the intersection of all of those different things. I'll share a couple Echo Northwest sample projects. This was just going on to our project website, so I encourage you all to take a peek at the Echo Northwest webpage, poke around, see what types of projects we've done. Another hint that for a good application and interview, you will have poked around and look at these and have an idea of the types of projects that are of interest to you. But this is just a sample of some of those projects. In the top left corner, you'll see we are doing work around homelessness all over the state and the region, but this is a particular example for the Portland region that we are looking at. How are our resources being spent? What's working well? What's not working well? And what are the different levers that we can pull in order to better address that? The project in the top middle that you have is the economic importance of recreation funding on Central Oregon's national forests. And so this is looking at the intersection of tourism, recreation, and economic impacts. How you measure that, the job growth that's associated with it, the impacts that it has on our natural resources. We look into the data of this. We look into some qualitative analysis of this, surveys, a really wonderful type of project work that a lot of us at Echo Northwest, and I would assume all over the state, enjoy our outdoors. We have in Oregon what's considered the second paycheck, which although Oregon might not pay as well as some other states or cities, we have access to the outdoors, which is what's sometimes considered that second paycheck and makes it so wonderful to live in Oregon. And we try and do our best to help quantify what that means for residents and tourists alike. On the top right, the project that I have highlighted is the methodology and recommendations for implementation of the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, otherwise known as the ONA. This is a whopper of a project that is having implications all over the state, and essentially, Echo Northwest is helping develop the methodology that is going to be applied to every single city that says, how many housing units do you need to build in your city? We take a look at what your need is for your different economic levels, for some different equity considerations, and we help each city get a target housing production goal so that we can try and address the housing shortage that we are all very much feeling, everything from home ownership to rental to supportive housing. And it is all wrapped up in this monstrous project that then cascades down to each city. On the bottom left, I have highlighted the Oregon State School Fund Evaluation. A lot of you are obviously involved in Oregon State schools, whether that's at the university level or down at the public K-12 level. We are looking at how our state funding is being allocated and the relative efficacy of that. Oregon currently is not ranking very well nationwide in terms of its school testing levels and output. Why is that? We're spending a lot per student. It ends up tying back into our tax system. We have one of the shortest school years nationwide, and so there's this level of absenteeism where kids aren't in classroom as much. And so, what are the different levers that we can pull at the policy level to help improve Oregon State's efficacy? And then lastly, on the bottom right, I have economic and fiscal impact of semiconductor industry expansion in Oregon. Now, semiconductors, the state of Oregon has made a massive effort in order to make this the Silicon Forest, different than the Silicon Valley, but starting back in the 80s and 90s, the entire state made a big effort towards developing these different microchips and semiconductors, very much associated with Intel, which it just recently, since their most recent round of layoffs, they've had some troubles and have had some different federal bailouts, but they were the number one employer in the state. They just recently dipped just below the number one employer. I believe OHSU is now number one, but it's still a major part of Oregon's economy. And we look at okay, what are the different things that we are doing at a legislative and policy level? What are we doing for workforce development? And what is the intersection of all of the economics, housing, residential components associated with that? So that's just a sample of some of the projects that we do at ECONorthwest. And the types of projects you could see yourself being involved in should you be an Ed Whitelaw Memorial intern. So, speaking of which, I've got some information here about the Ed Whitelaw Memorial Internship. You all should be able to find this on our application web page where there's additional information. I will speak a bit more about Ed Whitelaw, our founder, here in a moment. But just to start at the high level, this is a summer internship designed for rising seniors or recent graduates of an undergraduate economics degree program at an Oregon university. So if you are attending university in Oregon and are a rising senior or recent grad, you can qualify for this with the economics degree program. We are also looking, ideally, the requirements you will have coursework in any of the following subjects, which include econometrics, macro and microeconomic theory, land use planning, that's the direction that I'm coming in from, transportation planning, real estate development, or public policy. We do a lot of work here using Microsoft Word to produce our documents in Excel. So the spreadsheets, the world is essentially resting on the shoulders of Microsoft Excel. I was blown away to see how many different things rely on Microsoft Excel. I have gotten very good at it, and it is a very powerful program. If you are not familiar with Microsoft Excel, I would recommend boning up on that and figuring out some of the basic skills associated with it because you will likely be using it as an intern here at ECONorthwest. And then we're also looking for experience with some programming languages such as R or Python, being able to use GIS, data, implan, and or SQL. If you don't have all of those, that's fine. That's just a helpful thing we are looking for. Some additional information about the Ed Whitelaw internship and what you could potentially be doing. It will depend on your own interests. Like I said, we've got several different policy areas that you can be working in, but generally, you'll be looking at doing research about a particular project. We'll try and get you both on actual billable work that is contracted through a client, maybe the city of Coos Bay or the city of Springfield doing some work. And you'll get to do some research that will affect the outcome of those projects. We'll also have some other side task, interesting things that, hey, we want to know some more policy information about this. We'd like you to look up what climate migration is looking like currently, and maybe we'll have you track what's going on with insurance claims for fire-prone areas to get an idea about where folks might be moving given the different environmental considerations we're having to work with. So you'll be doing research, I can guarantee that. You will be working on identifying and organizing data. As I'd mentioned, we spend a lot of time in Excel. If you use R or one of the other programs, that's a place where you can keep that information and data organized. You will be summarizing that information. So you'll be given a task about, hey, we want you to research this, go through a data set. Here's 1,000 pages of different data things. We want that compiled into a way so that we can draw some different summary results of that. You will, of course, have support in that, folks that you can be asking questions to, but something that's very important that we do here is we have to be able to summarize large amounts of information into a clear and understandable format. You will be proactively reporting concerns and progress about project work. This is essentially set up for the actual work world. And so you will be given some tasks that you might go like, oh my gosh, I'm running into some walls. I don't know how to get beyond this. And that is the time where you should be reaching out and asking questions. That's how the work world works. That's how we work at ECOnorthwest. We don't expect you to have all of the answers up front. And when you run into those roadblocks, how do you do about asking for additional assistance? We expect to work to be completed on project timelines, and so we'll talk about project schedules. You're here for 10 weeks. This project is supposed to go on for 8 months. How do you slot into that exactly, and what are the different timeframes that you need to be aware of? One of the most fun parts of this, I think, is discussing our findings with staff. So you will go through, analyze a data set or research, and then let's talk about it. A lot of this is processed through conversation and collaboration. You'll recall that's one of the key values we have at ECOnorthwest is the role of collaboration. So you can say, hey, I'm finding these things. I think these are some of the implications associated with it. Is that right? Are there other things I should be looking into? And that will be a part of this entire process is the collaborative nature where at ECOnorthwest, we have some really wonderful, smart people with expertise that one of my recommendations is if you are an intern here, that you pick people's brain as much as possible because there's some very interesting, smart folks that have gone very far into the weeds of this and can provide you some really helpful insights. You will be expected to manage time based on deadlines. And so we've got these projects that we are working with, and you're going to have to, there's an element of juggling those and saying, oh, Scott tried to give me a task, but Sam has this other one that I'm working on that's actually due tomorrow. So I'm going to need to prioritize this first task in order to adequately address that. You'll be preparing sections of reports or memoranda that are associated with a project. So that means putting in tables, doing some writing. All of that is how we essentially share our findings and work with our clients, and then assist in developing presentations as needed. It's one thing to be able to write something. Oftentimes, our stakeholders are city council members or they're on the planning commission, and we are presenting at meetings where we can, should you choose, give you the opportunity to do presentations to that level of folks as well. So we've had this Ed Whitelaw internship for a few years now, and I wanted to highlight an example of someone who was awarded that Ed Whitelaw Memorial internship and has since started working for ECOnorthwest. Sam, would you please talk a bit about your experience as an Ed Whitelaw intern?
Yeah, happy to. I don't know how wise my words will be, but hopefully they're helpful. So, like I mentioned at the beginning, I was the intern 2 summers ago. So, as a rising senior at the University of Oregon, and then have since started on full time as a research analyst. So, I try to think about some things I learned or certain things I realized as an intern that were surprising to me coming out of college. And I think a really key a really key thing that I learned was the importance of just your soft skills and ability to be a team member, and how important that is relative to maybe your technical ability or statistics knowledge or econometrics mastery. Those things are all certainly important and great foundational pieces. But at the end of the day, what really matters is that people want to work with you and you can be a constructive team member. So it's really not all that different from experiences that you've had in your life, like being in a band, or being on a team or part of a club. It's those types of interpersonal skills that can go a long way. And then, the hard skills or the technical skills will come pretty quickly. We're always learning on the job at Echo. That's a big part of it. So it's okay if you don't know everything. It's okay if you don't, you know, if you're not a an R code wizard or haven't used a certain package before, something like that, you can learn that in a couple days or a week or over the course of a few months. But it's harder to learn, how to communicate or how to ask questions or how to be a good team member. So those types of skills are really important. And oftentimes, coming out of school, it's easy to be really focused on the hard technical skills. I think something else to think about is the storytelling of our job, and Scott touched on this a little bit too. But in school, you're focused on getting the right answer, filling in a line with usually a single number or something, a regression coefficient, and maybe one sentence of interpretation. But in consulting, that's not going to cut it. And it's the question, of course, you have to get the right answer, but the real challenge is how do I convey this answer and why it matters to a client or to the public. So it's really taking everything one step further than you've probably had to take it before, and thinking about how data really tell a story and why the story is important and why the client should care, that this line is going up or down or that it is intersecting with this other line. Those types of questions become much more important in the consulting world than they were in the academic world. So that's definitely something I've noticed too. And yeah, just to reiterate, I can't speak to other economics programs. I had never really used Microsoft Excel in school, but I don't know why they do that. Yeah, Scott's shocked. It's still very much used in the professional world. So if you've never used it before, that's certainly. I think I spent the first couple weeks of my internship just you know literally you're learning how to use Excel. So that's, if you want to get a jump start on, this internship or probably plenty of other internships or jobs in your future, and you haven't play around in Excel, see if you can convert some of your homework over to a spreadsheet or something. That would be a nice actionable recommendation. Yeah, those are my words of wisdom.
Thank you, Sam. Extremely helpful. I appreciate you sharing all that. I'm gonna share my screen again. Away from current slide. Cool. So, to sort of wrap up where we're at for our presentation side of things, and then we'll hop into the Q&A section of this. Some of the key dates to be aware of for the Ed Whitelaw Memorial Internship. Applications are open through March 29th, so there's a few weeks left to apply. The internship itself, it's meant to go over the summer, 10 weeks, full-time. But we're flexible on start date. I know some of the different universities have different end dates for their academic year. And so if it ends up being mid-June or late June or early June or the start of July, whatever, we can be flexible on that. What matters is that we are getting 10 full weeks of full-time work. The application requirements, you will need a resume, a cover letter. We have some questions embedded into our application that we would like responses to, a recommendation letter, And you must be able to work in the Portland office Tuesday through Thursday. Some folks will come in on Monday and Friday. A lot of people work hybrid on those days, and so it's sort of up to you. But we ended up adding this must be able to work in Portland Tuesday through Thursday requirement because we found one of the best ways that you are going to get networking connections, bang for your buck out of the time here is that you are going to be able to go out for coffee or for lunch with some other folks that work here at ECOnorthwest, or we'll be able to connect you with folks that work in adjacent fields. And so by being here in the office, folks are getting the most out of that. You get some of those like water cooler type of conversations in the kitchen area. We've got kombucha on tap. That was a new thing that got added when we switched offices, and that's turned into one of the areas where a lot of these informal conversations that turn into very interesting sorts of conversations that lead to different types of work or insights that you might not otherwise have because collaboration is the key to making all of this work very well, in addition to doing the rigorous work. But those conversations are something that we really want to make sure is happening for you in your internship. And so, one of the last things that I want to close on around this internship is that the work that we are doing is very influential and important. And I don't say that lightly. Sometimes I feel like there is a responsibility that comes with the work we are doing because we've been in operation for 50 years and we have a very good reputation associated with us, such that we are advising things to the governor's office. We are working with some of the most difficult, complex issues in the state, in the region. And so while that can feel like a heavy responsibility at times, it's a place where your work is having some very real impacts that are affecting some of the biggest problems that we are facing as a region, and even larger than that, some of these national conversations. So Echo Northwest, one of our primary goals right now is to be the premier policy advising consulting agency on the West Coast. And so we are involved in a lot of very important conversations that are affecting people's access to housing, whether or not they are housed or on the street. Economic development. What are folks' ability to get jobs? Are they getting jobs that can afford that housing? How are we protecting the environment? This is an existential crisis that we are all facing and is going to have some very serious implications that are currently taking place right now. We are doing work to help address that, do everything we can to be a part of it and a part of the solution. And so, one of my favorite things about working here is that the work that I am doing is helping my community and it's helping my region. And so, if you are interested in having some of those larger impacts where your day-to-day work has some very serious value that goes into it and is helping your fellow residents and folks in the region, then Echo Northwest is a good place for you to apply for a position at. Um, and with that, I will open things up for our question and answer session. If you have questions, you can go ahead and plop them in that Q&A option. I think you might have to click the More button in order to see that Q&A spot. And I will have Aaron and Sam can help me monitor that, make sure I can see where that's at.
We have had a couple of questions come in. One of them I answered in the chat. And then it looks like Sam is working on an answer. Do you want to discuss this one live as well?
Yeah, sure. I was
Okay.
trying to
This
type
is,
it, but
Oh, that's a
speaking's
good
easier.
Sam answer. Yeah, that's a good one for you
Yeah,
to answer,
yeah,
Sam.
I got excited. Yeah.
So
Um,
please repeat the question out loud so everyone, in case they can't see the chat, can hear it.
the questions around, based on this semiconductor project that we've worked on, whether we consider kind of the environmental impact or maybe some of the just general costs or negative externalities associated with semiconductors and downstream effects of data centers. I love this topic. I did my undergrad thesis on data centers, and it's certainly work that we're involved in. We have a couple ongoing projects, usually working for local county governments, and we help them understand kind of the fiscal or tax implications of data center development. But we also, especially in a couple upcoming projects, are helping them start to understand the costs, which you're getting to with your question. So of course, those are water usage and maybe increased energy prices or pollution, noise pollution, air pollution, and then also the workforce effects. So it's a hot topic in the Pacific Northwest, especially, and it's definitely something that we have existing involvement with, and we see even more projects coming in pretty soon that deal with this question.
And one of the things that I will piggyback on with that response in AI in general, that's something that we've had as more AI tools are rolling out. We've talked a lot internally about the ethics of it, how we are using it. I'd mentioned early on, we've got our data equity framework and equity framework in general with how we are approaching a lot of the work that we are doing and how we integrate that. We're using some AI. I would say I think a lot less than some other firms might be using, but we've sort of set up a green light, yellow light, red light for where AI is appropriate to use and where it is not. One of the things that ECOnorthwest is founded on and takes pride in is our independence, and us, our ability to do our own work that is as objective as can be and not influenced by some of the pitfalls that can be associated with AI. And so we use it in certain ways, but for like the data analysis side of things, that's one of our red light. We are doing the data analysis ourselves. There might be ways where you can integrate a little bit of AI to clean up some of the processes, but we're monitoring it closely, seeing what's working and what's not working. And in general, we're finding that for data analysis itself, not working very well. And so we are going through and we do each bit of data analysis individually with smart humans behind it processing that. We have a large QA, QC process, the quality assurance and quality control to make sure that anytime we get some results, they're vetted and checked. Um, yeah, and it's a serious conversation that we are using in lots of different ways. How do we not fall behind and how do we integrate it appropriately and ethically as well?
There was another question that I already answered in the chat, or I'm sorry, in the Q&A, but I'd like to speak to it for a minute. And this question was around if you don't meet one of the requirements, but are still interested in learning about early career opportunities or other internships or fellowships, what are our options? So for this particular internship, we are looking for recent graduates, which we are defining as somebody who has graduated in spring of 2025 or later. Um, if you don't meet that particular requirement or one of the other requirements, you are still welcome to email me. I dropped our email address in the Q&A. It's also on the application page online. Send me your resume and let me know what your interests are, and we can start a conversation that way because we do have other opportunities that come up.
And then I'm seeing the next two questions. I think I will take
Great.
Samir's question to start with. And then for Xavier's, the next one, Sam, you might be a good one to start answering on that question, and I can fill in a little bit as well. But for Samir's question about how does Echo Northwest assign tasks to interns? Will you be looking at competencies, areas of experience, or areas of interest more when deciding which intern will be given each task? Do interns get agency in joining projects?
Great
Yes.
question.
Yeah, this is something that we try and emphasize as much as possible. Different folks are going to come into this internship with different areas of skills and interests. And one of the best things about ECOnorthwest is the variety of project work that we are on. And we really try and match folks to projects that are of interest to them. If you're not as interested in a particular project, you're not going to get as much out of it. We're not going to get as much out of the work that you are doing. We very much want to get you doing work that you want to build and grow into, where you have your personal passions and interests in. And so there is a lot of agency that goes into that. Usually, the first week of an internship is just getting your bearings about you. What is it? What is the breadth of things that we do at Echo Northwest? Let's get you talking with some of the different project managers and project directors and associates and research analysts to get an idea of what the variety of things that are done, and the different areas of work that we have currently ongoing projects that you might be able to plug into. And so we do try and make this match as much as possible what your interests are. If housing is your jam, I got a lot of work for you. If you're more interested in transportation, we'll probably send you over Ian Carlton's way. He's doing a lot of work around transit-oriented development, bus rapid transit systems, and different light rails getting plugged in different states. If you're more interested in social policy, Jade Aguilar is going to be the person we'll get you connected with. So we have all the different folks, and we will try and match you to the best of our and your abilities.
Scott, do you want to skip ahead to this question about real estate valuation question? One, I could never answer that question. And two, Sam is working on the question from Samir.
Great. So I see this one. Can you guys elaborate more on your real estate valuation mechanisms for development? Boy, howdy, can I? So I've currently got about three ongoing projects right now about real estate valuation. At Echo Northwest, we do a lot of different ways of valuating land, property, improvements, improvement value, infrastructure associated with it. One of the key metrics that we use is residual land value. And there's lots of different ways that you can evaluate land and development, but the residual land value is one where you look at what are all the development costs associated with, imagine it is a 6-story mixed use building with ground floor commercial and studio 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom residential units on top of that. We can largely back into what are the costs that it's going to take for each level and each different use type. What are the current market returns that we're seeing with interest rates, what we're seeing with loans to valuation, what is the net operating income, how much money is this property producing, and so what is the overall value, more or less, of that type of development. Given that we know that stack of valuation, how much is left over to purchase land? And there might be a surplus of value, meaning someone thinking about developing this particular land could afford to spend $9 per square foot of land, and they would still be able to make all of their metrics for returns needed in order to get access to financing to build that. Oftentimes, it's not the case. There will be the development costs exceed what the actual value is because currently we know interest rates are very high. There's a bunch of things associated with construction costs that are very high. Anytime concrete is used in development, that's driving up prices, particularly when it's for structured parking. And so, all right, what is the gap then that a city would need to provide as a subsidy, or the county might need to provide so that you can figure out what is that valuation and the gap associated with it. There's different ways that we look on valuing land as well. This is one of the recommendations that I have for folks. If you can take any coursework in land valuation, I found that to be extremely valuable in my work. I was mentioning before, we'll talk about zoning, and you could zone for a 50-story skyscraper, but if you've zoned for that in a sort of suburban residential area, that's never going to get built, and here's why. And we discussed some of that.
I would like to take a minute and speak a little bit more to Xavier's questions about the importance of collaborative discussions and what a big part of the culture and job experience that is. Sam did answer it in the Q&A. I'd also like to just reiterate some of Scott's points from earlier about how important the connections and the relationship building is to having a successful internship. Um, having, and that's part of the reason why um, we want folks that can be in the Portland office, because having the opportunity to work closely with folks that are um, experts in their work and are so skilled and talented is really important. And building the relationships and the ability to network and get to know folks on a personal level is really going to be so beneficial to any intern, because those relationships can help you later. You can create mentorships. And it's also just a really fun place to work. We're kind of a hoot, I think. And so just the more you can be in the office and get involved. And I remember seeing Sam do all of these things, like go to lunches and go out for coffee with people. And, folks go out after work. I mean, none of those are a requirement, obviously, but the more you get involved, I think the more you'll get out of it and the more beneficial it will be to the intern in the long run.
And I will add on that to sing Sam's praises a little bit as someone who started out as an intern. And then when it came time, like, oh, we have a research analyst position opening up, Sam would be excellent for this. One of the things that Sam did a really, really good job of was being willing to step into work, being willing to collaborate on things, having an open mindset around all that, leading with curiosity. I'd mentioned our values at ECOnorthwest. I will continue to go back to that and recommend that if you apply for this internship, that you really look at those values and think about how they fit with your own values and emphasizing those. Sam did a really, really good job of being willing to step into some like, I don't necessarily know all the answers to this thing. It's a little outside of my comfort zone, but I know how to ask questions and I am willing to try that and have a conversation about it and mention when I don't know something and here's what I think I would do with it. How would you do it? And he did an excellent job of advocating for himself around the work that he was interested in doing. And I think that's one of the main reasons why, as an organization, we went, yes, he was a great intern. Now let's hire him as a full-time employee.
I think
Agreed.
it's I think it's important to strike a balance between not shying away from tasks when they're thrown at you, and, saying yes to things, but also being honest with yourself and your project manager. Hey, Scott, that sounds really interesting. I'm excited to check that out, but I have no idea, what that word even means. So it's good to find that balance where you're being active, you're getting involved in everything you can, but you're also being honest about what you know and what you don't know. And it's okay to not know things. No one expects you to know everything.
All right. I can take this question that just came up, that the internships for recent graduates. Yes, it is for recent graduates or folks that are rising seniors, so about to start your senior year. So either timing works for this internship. We've got just a few minutes left if there are other questions that folks want to pop in.
I see there's still the open Q&A question about the semiconductors. I don't know how to make that one go as
Oh,
answered.
there we go.
All right.
All right, here's a new one. You mentioned there's collaboration between projects and policy areas. Are there projects that inform each other, or are interns expected to stay in one policy area?
Sam, do you want to take a first go at that?
Sure. I would say, uh, yes, there are projects that inform each other. Uh, the the cluster areas are ways to organize our brains around the massive amount of projects that come in the door. But Most projects have to consider effects on all of those kind of aspects. And then as an intern, I think it's certainly helpful to express your interests and what places you have experience, but it's equally as important to express where you're just curious but have no idea about something, and try to get involved with really as many different projects and different kind of cluster areas as you can. Having the more exposure, the better, to different topics, but also to different project teams, project directors, project managers. Just don't be afraid to branch out and try a little bit of everything. There's certainly some flexibility in terms of which projects you take on, but my recommendation would be don't stay in one policy area and get as broad as you can.
One thing that I will add to that, completely agree. And by trying to diversify the different areas that you have project work and experience in, I think there's an element of like job security that goes into that as well. As we see some different shifts that happen in funding from the federal level to the state level and then at the local municipal level, there's some different trends that take place. So we've done a bunch of work around diversity, equity, inclusion. A bunch of that funding has currently dried up. We think it will come up again, but the ability to have done that work, but then you see like, oh no, there's not public contracts for that right now. We need to be able to look at some of these other areas that are adjacent to that. And by seeking out that project work, it makes you a more valuable employee as well, where you can be like, okay, well, I know how to do work around affordable housing finance as well. And we know that's going to be around, and there's plenty of work to be done there. And so by bouncing between having more experience in different project areas, I think is something that allows you to flex the most at a place like ECOnorthwest that does have all these different policy areas that we work in, as opposed to siloing yourself into just one area.
It's a great question in the chat. What has been the most valuable part of your experience working here? I think that's a great question. My answer would just be the people and the team that we have. I think we have, there's a great vibe at Echo where everyone wants to collaborate and work together, and we all are striving to really create the best possible output and deliverable and really find the right answers. So it curates just a really nice vibe to be a part of, and that's one of my favorite parts about being here.
Aaron, do you want to? Oh, you're typing an answer. I will.
But I'm happy to speak live. This question about from Aller about would an accounting degree with an econ minor be a desirable combination? I say yes, because accounting would you probably have strong Excel skills, strong analysis skills, especially if you're really interested in doing analytical work. We do a lot of work in the tax realm, finance, public finance. So certainly some parallels there that having an accounting degree could be helpful and useful here. So yes.
And I'll bump back to that answer as well about what has been the most valuable part of your experience working here. Sam, you started to answer that. One of the things that I will add to that as well, the breadth of work that we do. I've got a bunch of my classmates that I graduated from my Master's of Urban and Regional Planning program, and they're at some consulting firms as well. And they really like their work and what they're doing, but it's a lot more of a like lane that they are in. They do current planning, or they do only real estate development. The variety of work is something that makes me excited because I can get tired out of doing just one thing over and over. And then the other thing about ECOnorthwest, because we are very well respected and we're working all over the state. I am from Coos Bay, Oregon, on the southern Oregon coast. And it's been very, very rewarding to get to work on some projects that are associated with my hometown as well. I recently completed an economic opportunities analysis and economic development strategic plan where I got to leverage some of the connections that I still have in the community and go back and do focus group interviews and leaning into an area where like, oh my gosh, this is very close to my heart as well. And it lines up with what some of the policy type of work that I'm interested in. That was an extremely valuable experience for me. And I know there's going to be more type of work that comes up in that direction. So you really get to guide the work that you do in an area that you care about. I didn't specialize in doing educational social policy work, but I care very much about it. My wife does work there. I was a former teacher, and so I can still be involved in educational type of work, which is very important to me. And I wouldn't be able to do that at a different firm.
All right. I think we have answered all of the questions that have come into the Q&A. Is only one intern this summer? Yes. For the Ed Whitelaw internship, yes, one.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate your attendance of this. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. We really hope that you apply for this. What we are hoping to find is someone that um, really cares about the work that they are doing, wants to dive in and do rigorous, complex work that we will provide some support and scaffolding to, but we want you to be curious. We want you to be collaborative, and we really want you caring about this type of work. So I've said it before, I'll say it again. Check out our values at Echo Northwest. I would recommend really adapting your different application materials to resonate with those. I think that will make for a strong application, and then we'll look forward to the interview process that comes after that. So thank you all so much.
Yeah.
Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.